Well, there's another quality roach. Fishing today on one of my favourite sorts of venues, a big natural reservoir. Fishing the whip short for roach. There's a few perch as well, and perhaps an odd skimmer. Let's see if we can catch a few more. What we'll try and show you in this video is the rigs, ground baits and the actual tactics involved with fishing whips on big natural venues. Venues like this up and down the country now seem to be packed with roach. There's been a real explosion of fish in these natural venues, particularly roach, and the whip is one of the fastest ways to actually catch them. Providing the conditions are right and you can get the fish to come close enough to you and feed well over ground bait or loose feed, it's a great way of putting a really big net of fish together. The fish in this particular venue seem to be responding well to ground bait. We balled in at the start, approximately 10 balls of ground bait with plenty of casters, some hemp seed and a few dead maggots. Then over the top of that, we've been feeding little balls of ground bait and then regularly loose feeding. In early to mid-May, when the fish start to spawn, you often find that as well as there's another lovely roach. As well as sort of regular ground bait, feeding little balls often, the fish actually respond really well to loose feed. I don't know whether it's because the fish are starting to spawn and they're all over the water column, but they just seem to respond particularly well during sort of May and June to loose feed as well as the ground bait. See, we just flick the rig back out there. Pouch of hemp, little nugget of ground bait, about the size of a golf ball, there or thereabouts, and out into the peg. The most important thing when you fish the whip, it's the same with most methods, but it is particularly important with the whip, is to always make sure that you feed short of where you're fishing. Because with a pole, if you do feed long, you can always add another section and perhaps just sneak out past where you've fed and see if there's any fish there. But with the whip, you're limited to the length of the whip and the length of line you've got. So if you do throw any bait past where you're fishing, it's nearly impossible to actually search the back of your peg, and you end up with fish actually out beyond where you're fishing, and it makes them very difficult to catch. And you'll often find that it's the bigger, craftier fish that hang back off your feed, and you're limiting your chances of actually catching those fish. We are having some dreadful trouble today with pike. There's been pike leaping out of the water after the fish, and it's actually been unsettling them a little bit in the peg. Just feed another pouch of hemp. Just laid the rig in there. Seems to be that as soon as you build the peg and you get a number of roach there, the pike turn up, move the fish, or even jump out of the water when you're trying to swing them to hand. There's another roach. These natural roach really are wonderful. They're lovely colours, lovely dark fish. The mix we're using on this big natural venue today when we're fishing the whip is very simple. It's one bag of super black lake mixed with a bag of big gross gardons. The big roach gross gardons is stickier than the fine gross. It's better for when you're looking to introduce lots of particles, get more fish into your peg with a bigger, heavier mix. Once that's mixed, we're then going to add one bag of TDR. TDR is a soil, and the only reason we're adding it is for weight and also to help the actual breakdown of the ground bait. It's great because when the ground bait goes into the peg and the fish start to attack it, the TDR will actually actively break the ground bait down. If you've just got 100% ground bait, the ground bait takes longer to break down, and when you're looking to catch lots of fish, it will lead to a slower catch rate because the bait you're introducing will be breaking down slower, drawing less fish into your peg. It's a really good mix when you're looking to catch lots of fish on the whip on natural venues. There we are, another quality roach. just run through the rig that I'm using. So start with the hook. These are my favourite hooks actually for fishing the whip, particularly on natural venues where we're allowed to use barbed hooks. It's a Sensus 3065 in a 16. Now that's on a 0.13 diameter 6-inch hook length. 0.13 is pretty heavy stuff really when you're only fishing for roach, but they're natural fish, they haven't seen a hook before, they're not line shy. As I say, there's lots of pike in here at the moment and they're chasing every fish, so it just helps having that slightly heavier line. So above the loop-to-loop there's 2 number 8s. It's actually set up as a double bulk, so you've got 2 8s and then approximately 10 inches above that the olivette. Now the reason for the double bulk when you're fishing the whip is we're fishing over ground bait today. You get the rig down very quickly, and then what you're actually looking for, either the float will go under or the fish will lift this little bulk here, the 2 8s, and you'll get the pop up on the float. So the float will actually rise in the water, indicating lift bite, and you'll get a fish on. So the main line, that's 0.19 diameter. Again, the reason for that is rigidity and strength. The more rigid it is, the less chance you've got of tangles. When you've got a long line between the bottom of the whip and the top, when we were fishing 7 metres today, there's lots of opportunity for a thinner diameter line to tangle. And moving up from that, it's about 6 foot deep today, so moving from the hook up, we've got a Sensus Alberto. These are without a doubt my favourite whip floats. They're perfect because it's an elongated body. There's a sort of middle to it, but it's tapered at either end. Lovely elongated float, offers next to no resistance on the strike. When you actually strike through the float, there's no disturbance on the surface. It's not like striking through a big round-bodied float where you're pulling it up through the water. And when you're fishing with the whip, it's not like the pole where you're directly above the float lifting into the fish. You are coming at it from a slight angle, and these floats just come through the water so cleanly you bump less fish. That's 3 grams today. We need the weight because there's a bit of a wind in our face here. You've got to get the rig out and you've got to make sure it's actually stable once it's in there. So moving from the Alberto up to the top of the whip, we've got a Dacron connector and then a hollow elastic. It's a yellow Sensus hollow. It's about a 10 to 12 and it's set relatively soft. It's soft enough that you don't bump these roach, but you can also swing in quite a good sized fish. We've probably swung fish up to about 10 ounces today without any trouble at all. One of the other beauties with whip fishing is actually how inexpensive it is. You think you can get lots of whips on the market now for not a great deal of money, and you can come to a big reservoir or a river and catch plenty of fish for very little cost. It's a great way of actually getting people into fishing. If you've never been, or you've got a member of your family that you perhaps like to take fishing, it's an excellent way to actually get them into fishing and catching a few fish.